Good Monday morning from a very sleepy Galesburg, Illinois. Today, we're traveling to St. Paul, Minnesota aboard Amtrak, the Illinois Zephyr, and the Borealis. Illinois Zephyr is the name given to the first Amtrak train on the Quincy to Chicago route. Carl Sandburg is what the second daily train is called. So really the only thing that could slow us down today is freight traffic on the BNSF portion up to Aurora, and then metro traffic on the way into Chicago. Galesburg is very quiet in the morning, except for trains and garbage trucks, but otherwise that pleasant cricket sound that you attribute to Midwest peace and quiet is here. If we are more than 40 minutes late coming into Chicago, I will either automatically or by way of talking to Amtrak guest relations be taking the Empire Builder home, not the Borealis. Again, there have been no delays to these trains in the last few days, but if that delay never happens, we should just be able to walk to the Borealis boarding area and then stand in that terrible rat's nest maze that they have in the basement of Union Station. On my first video about this route on the Carl Sandburg, the train that was going the other way that passed us had an Amfleet business class cafe car on it. And if my timing is correct and there have been no equipment substitutions, that train set should be running today out of Quincy for my trip. Meaning that I won't get venture cars for this business class run. I will get the classic business class that everybody loves. Which will it be? For sure there'll be a free coffee, but I need some coffee now. Should be a coffee shop here downtown that's opening soon or just opened, right? Yeah, they're open. They even have outside seating. As you can see inside there, it absolutely is warm. But I feel like mid-September is when you really start to appreciate the patio, at least here in the middle of North America. I'd recommend Galesburg to anyone looking to just have a quiet sort of time, but still be able to go out and do things that are entertaining. It's antique shopping, it's bars, restaurants, it's a lot of local history, a lot of national history through here too, but especially train history. Have the best time. Waste only. It'll be interesting to see how many people utilize the Illinois Zephyr for Monday morning commuting to cities down the line or on to Chicago at the end. I'm pretty confident in this Borealis connection. I've been watching the trains over the past week, and more often than not, they have gotten into Chicago on time. I don't know if there's any schedule padding there. We'll see. I would like to not have to spend more than an hour on a hard wooden bench, even in the illustrious Great Hall, but I don't have enough money for a lounge pass, and I wouldn't have enough time. I can't imagine it arriving an hour early. Found the best patio. Ooh. It should also be noted that the Amtrak station is served by a Burlington Trailways bus that runs between Denver and Indianapolis, making it possible for you to take a trip across the Midwest without going to Chicago if you can stand a bus. I've heard Burlington Trailways is pretty good. Maybe I'll have to take it someday. Among the things I did not expect to see in Galesburg, Illinois at the train station on a Monday morning was a guy in a VR headset randomly poking at things. The Illinois Zephyr is the original Amtrak train that serves towns between Quincy and Chicago, Illinois. Galesburg is the third stop on the route eastbound, and this Monday morning saw about 20 passengers boarding here for points east. Through the night and all day, Galesburg sees freight traffic here at the point where subdivisions to Peoria, Quincy, Kansas City, and distant cities split going west. Our eastbound trip will see multiple lines converge on our overall intermediate destination of Chicago Union Station. Amfleet business class. Here we go. And that's 4602. Oh, did I spot it again? Oh, I spotted it again. Very good. Our train 380 arrives 14 minutes late, sporting 2 Venture coaches, 1 Venture business class car acting as coach class, and our Amfleet 1 Club Dinette car, number 48184, built in Philadelphia by the Bud Company in 1975. Converted to this layout in 2003, this is the kind of business class I will gladly pay extra for when traveling Amtrak. The 1-2 layout features these cushier padded seats with leg and footrests as well as tray tables, 2 power outlets, and curtains for the windows. Not that I'll be using that feature this morning. While this car has lower capacity than the Venture business class car I rode into Galesburg, it is much more comfortable by way of the experienced but maintained seats and very close proximity to the snack bar at the center of the car I'm already in. While it's good that Amtrak can get more business class fares from the new Venture cars, the higher density cabin and stiffly padded seats of the Ventures will never fulfill the intended comfort quotient solved by the Amfleet business class. Had Amtrak coordinated with Siemens to design the replacement cafe cars with such a seating layout and less stiff seats with actual recline, that, along with the proximity to the complimentary drink in the cafe, would have better delivered on the more than double cost fare of business class does. Both of the trains I'm due to ride today are state-sponsored routes, an Amtrakism that deserves some clarification. Basically, state-sponsored routes are trains that aren't overnight trains that are funded as budgetary items of the states which they serve, rather than the national government's budget for Amtrak. Amtrak gets to expand their brand by being the operator of these routes. Some states have gone as far as pooling funds by way of line items within budgets over the years that provide for the manufacturer of new rail cars that bear the Amtrak name, and smaller marks regarding the regional branding of their routes, as well as their state transportation department's logos on the locomotives. These state-sponsored routes have lately been offered as a practical but infrequent service for Amtrak's Midwest brand. On the outside, the refreshed look of the newer Venture cars has great curb appeal to those driving themselves to cities closer to Chicago from outstate towns. Fares are typically appealingly low for coach, and states have occasionally invested in improvements to the freight railroad right-of-ways to improve train speed and capacity. On paper, states, Amtrak, freight railroads, and riders all benefit from additional travel options afforded by these trains. On this line in Illinois, the Zephyr is another train serving Galesburg, Mendota, and Naperville, in addition to long-distance overnight trains that also call on these stations. Other cities that see Illinois Zephyr and Carl Sandburg only stopping at their stations on this line get access to the national network by way of connection on this state-sponsored train. Airport access for the towns is also maintained by these trains, which reduces the need for the federal government's essential air service schedules and subsidies. What the Zephyr provides is a relatively short trip over a route improved by state funds aboard trains that should have many years to serve passengers with their new rail cars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, our next station stop will be Princeton. If you'd like to get off the train here, make your way towards the rear of the train. This is Princeton next stop.
The Venture cars are replacements for the Horizon cars that previously ran on this service and the Carl Sandburg that I took the day before. The business class product has been offset by the Venture's attempt at a set of more modular onboard amenities. The competition, after all, is Amtrak versus the airlines in public transit, especially at the business class level on a playing field that doesn't include personal vehicles, through the eyes of those in the executive level of Amtrak, many of which have served on airline boards in the past. Passengers out here have convenient station parking and schedules that arrive passengers prior to lunchtime in Chicago, with plenty of long-distance connections within Amtrak. What's been working for the Zephyr and Carl Sandburg in particular is the quiet-riding, good-looking new train sets that operate a concise schedule and provide capacity that fits the demand for travel between cities on this line. Having the business class fare lets Amtrak accommodate those like me who would pay to add a bit of positive existentialism to their trip, be it with cash, credit, expense accounts, or Amtrak guest rewards points like I use today.
Boys and girls, this is plain old wonder open towards the rear of the train. This is plain old.
Coach class would be adequate, but there's more solitude in the club section of this 50-year-old Amfleet car, and having access to its sole restroom afforded only to crew and business class passengers ups the experience enough to increase the civility of the process, as well as the overall enjoyment of the trip. As we enter the vicinity of Aurora, Illinois, we take on the character of a limited express train. As we knock down signals passing through downtown and the historic Roundhouse, we move into Metra territory. We pass into the 10 o'clock hour making up time. We've experienced little in the way of freight traffic on this Monday morning. The park and ride lots at the various Metra stations show the viability of the BNSF line. In a coming video, we'll revisit my westbound ride from the prior day in this trip, the one I teased in the Carl Sandburg video from Chicago to Naperville. Under Metra operations, this line will continue to serve passengers over its third century of operations. The racetrack, as it's known to rail fans, will continue to endear, both to that group as well as Chicagoland commuters. It certainly did for me on this trip. We were routed inbound, passing Metra stations without getting stuck behind any commuter trains, ensuring that I wouldn't be spending the early afternoon in Chicago aboard the Empire Builder, the 3 p.m. departure time having been my backup train to St. Paul, should the Illinois Zephyr had run late and I had to visit Amtrak guest relations to make a change to my overall itinerary. Being that this line continues to operate efficiently for Metra and Amtrak, one can see how the Illinois Zephyr remains a very viable train for Amtrak and the people in the outstate Illinois cities it serves.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, now arriving at our next station stop, LaGrange. LaGrange, did you stop these things time getting belong to the train? This is LaGrange.
Station, 15, 20 minutes. Thank you all.
Now's the perfect time to check around your seats and all your luggage racks to make sure you have all of your belongings before you detrain. On behalf of the entire Amtrak crew, we appreciate your round with us tonight.
The second leg of my trip from Galesburg to St. Paul is aboard the state-sponsored Borealis, train 1333. I've been riding this train since the first week of its operation. The boarding process was then much the same as it is now for this as well as most other coach passengers at Chicago's Union Station. The Zephyr's arrival being only 7 minutes late on an overall layover of about 40 potential minutes puts me toward the front of the middle of the ever-extending queue of passengers that will be boarding the train's departure for Borealis at just past 11 a.m. No track yet, that means they're not boarding, so let's go to try to get to something like the front of the line. Unless this is the line.
Station stops at Glenview, Sturtevant, General Mitchell Airport, downtown Milwaukee, Columbus, Portage, Wisconsin Dells, Toma, La Crosse, Winona, Red Wing, and lastly downtown St. Paul. Folks, this is a sold-out train today. We do need all personal items out of the seats next to you. Everybody will need a place to sit. Once again, this is a sold-out train today. And once again, folks, this is Amtrak train 1333 Borealis. This is not a Hiawatha. This is not the Empire Builder. If you are ticketed for anything other than 1333, please come talk to the conductor. We are a sold-out train. We will not have seats for those who are not ticketed for this train.
This is my third northbound trip aboard the Borealis. After nearly 16 months of operating the route from Chicago to the Twin Cities, the overbearing tone of the conductor's initial announcements in Chicago has largely remained the same. You hear that kind of tone on the feedback-laden breath of many a crew across Amtrak's long-distance network. But it seems to stick to crews on Borealis more than other, shorter, state-sponsored routes. When this train began, it was operating the same single-level Horizon cars that used to form the whole of most schedules of Amtrak state-sponsored routes in the Midwest. It did so not with the Venture coaches that also operate on Chicago to Milwaukee-bound Hiawatha trains on the historic Milwaukee Road line now under the ownership of Metra and CPKC, because the state of Minnesota didn't contribute state funding to the purchase of the Venture cars. Only Wisconsin and Illinois. This past March, the Borealis began to run with 3-car Superliner train sets, sometimes 4, when the Horizon cars were pulled from service by the Federal Railroad Administration's finding of corrosion on the Horizon's aluminum car bodies. The only other passenger train to serve the route beyond Milwaukee to St. Paul was and remains the long-distance Empire Builder, and it does so daily with these same Superliner coaches for base-level tickets. The differences between taking the earlier departing Borealis and the later Empire Builder westbound for a single passenger in coach might seem to be won by the convenience of Borealis's timing, but there's more at play here. The at-seat experience sold by Amtrak at the time of booking for the average price of around $40 per person a couple months out is better than flying between Chicago and MSP, mostly. These are, after all, long-distance trains made for passengers to spend as much as 2 days and nights aboard on a single run. The recently reupholstered Superliner coach seats are clean, wide, and have more legroom than first class on planes flying the route between Chicago and the Twin Cities, but that's mostly where the comparison ends for most travelers, and where I should have left it for myself in planning. But what the Superliner-equipped Borealis lacks for a single passenger taking the trip alone versus flying, or even in comparison to its initial single-level incarnation with Horizon cars, adds up in the 7+ hour travel time for this route. There's plenty to be said about that amount versus flying or taking intercity trains elsewhere in the world, and plenty of passengers aboard Borealis do talk about it, especially during boarding, but often as well out loud throughout the whole trip. You can always tell that Borealis is certainly attracting new ridership on this route to Amtrak, not only by the number of riders, but by their attitudes, words, and demeanor exhibited.
This will be your last call for Glenview. Only center or rear door opening. Now arriving, Glenview, Illinois. If you walk up to that front car, there are no seats in that car. You will need to be in the center or rear car to find a seat.
But whether these riders are going to return and find the second and third journeys aboard Borealis as appealing is up for debate. With uniformed conductors opening here at General Mitchell Airport.
Taking a left, go all the way down. That's where you'll find those buses. Please watch your step exiting the train here at downtown Milwaukee. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a crew change point. What that means for you is you will need to utilize the stair direction. Crew change point. Conductors will be getting off and a new crew will be getting on. On behalf of the crew that's brought you from Chicago to Milwaukee today, we do appreciate you choosing Amtrak as your mode of transportation, and for those of you carrying on, we wish you happy and safe travels. Milwaukee, now arriving. Downtown Milwaukee, the intermodal station.
Our next stop coming up in about 1 hour will be Columbus. Columbus up next in about 1 hour. Welcome aboard.
Hey, it's the red bathroom. Well, it's a different place to be. If we accept that trains will never run timetables as fast as airlines due to the Midwestern environs of the old Milwaukee Road route to the Twin Cities, or the alternate Chicago and Northwestern route that hugs the Wisconsin side bank of the Mississippi River that we'll be seeing both from afar later on and directly in the final miles towards St. Paul, there just isn't the political or financial capital available for the re-engineering these freight-dominated routes into high-speed intercity lines and the fastest trains of the golden age of railroading ever did only so slightly faster than our trip today. Then we're left with the quality of the onboard experience as the saving grace for Amtrak and the driving force to retain passenger loyalty on future trips between MSP and Chicago.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming out to Portage. If Portage is your stop, you've not done so already, please gather together your personal belongings and make your way to the lower level of that second or third car.
The Borealis wasn't making as much potential revenue in its days when Horizon cars were in service, and it's making even less now that the superliners have taken over, due to their lower capacity and, as I'm experiencing today, a lack of a business class option at a higher fare. I can't imagine the smaller snack coach configuration of our car, with the snack bar in the lower level of the coach where accessible lower level seating typically is, along with bathrooms and the vestibule to enter and exit the train. What's also not present, versus the Empire Builder, is a place other than a single coach seat for coach passengers to occupy. In particular, all passengers ticketed from Chicago to St. Paul today have been located in the upper level of the snack coach.
At the Wisconsin Dells, if you've not done so already, please gather together your personal belongings and make your way to the lower level of that second or third car. Those will be the only two doors opening up here at the Wisconsin Dells. This is the final call for the Wisconsin Dells. And thank you for choosing Amtrak as your means of transportation this afternoon.
This is primarily so the two conductors solely present aboard the train need not open a third door at intermediate station stops. Remember, the doors of the superliners have to be opened and closed manually by the crew, and there is only a conductor and assistant conductor aboard.
That was the Wisconsin Dells. For those of you who just boarded with us here at the Wisconsin Dells, welcome aboard. This is Amtrak train 1333, the westbound Borealis, headed up to St. Paul. Our next stop coming up in about 45 minutes will be Toma. Toma up next in about 45 minutes. Welcome aboard.
This helps the train maintain an efficient pacing and hopefully an on-time arrival at all stations. This is the same as it was on my trip aboard the Borealis back in spring on the first week of these Superliner consists. But then I was traveling with my teenage child, not alone with a stranger seated next to me. I would have to ask this stranger to get up whenever I needed to use the restroom or wanted to visit the snack bar in the lower level. Being that this is a sold-out train, conductors were enforcing the seating assigned on the platform in Chicago as a means to keep an orderly train, but it means that I had nowhere else to occupy other than the restroom if I decided to stretch or to take in a change of setting for variety over the 7+ hours aboard. Whereas on the later Empire Builder, I could walk the upper level of the train to the Sightseer lounge car for food and alternate, albeit sometimes limited, seating choices other than my assigned seat. There would also be the option of the full-service dining car in the Empire Builder during a dinner time call prior to nightfall arrival in St. Paul. The Superliner experience for solo Chicago to MSP passengers aboard Borealis is like a 7-hour transatlantic flight in a business class grade seat, but you're only going the distance that it would take to fly in an hour between Chicago and MSP. Even accounting for time spent in security and boarding at the airport, Borealis still feels like a longer, low-cost flight across the Atlantic when you don't know your seatmate and have only the vestibule door window or the random smells of the restroom for your entertainment. When I ask whether passengers will return to this service given these factors, I do so in all seriousness, as a nearly 20-year Amtrak rider on his third westbound Borealis trip. This direction of travel affords a very even keel comparison of this Amtrak offering and the Empire Builder versus flying. Flying wins for anyone pressed for time, but the Empire Builder wins on the basis of having 2 other rail cars for coach passengers to move to, or better yet, be a sleeping car passenger with the ultimate level of privacy. But passengers aboard Borealis all seem to keep a good attitude despite the lack of a lounge car. They see this as a busy train, and thus their choice to take it was initially validated by the popularity of the route and its sustainable operation versus the stresses and economics of flying. Amtrak has a better baggage policy, which my seatmate was clearly taking advantage of. He was moving back from Jackson, Mississippi, having come up on the City of New Orleans train the night before. The fact that more passengers can make connections to MSP via the westbound Borealis is doing well for the hope that people will buy into future expansions of Amtrak train service in this part of the country. But with Amtrak having the sparsest pool of rail cars ever presently on which to operate services, sets that effort back. Politicians that didn't want money going to this train will no doubt have their arguments against continuing it be bolstered, even though canceling the service would mean constituents would have only one other train, more crowded buses, and airliners or more highway congestion to contend with when traveling without this route. Unfortunately, Amtrak as the operator has most all of its superliners tied up across its long-distance network of overnight routes, and those coaches that aren't running are awaiting a 30 to 50-year maintenance and overhaul by a relatively small workforce at few shops across the country. The most practical way forward for Borealis to achieve higher revenues right away would be to have shunting devices installed on locomotives running trains along the Illini and Saluki routes, like the one we saw in Chicago Union Station the morning before today's trip. Those trains are currently under orders by the right-of-way owner Canadian National Railway to run Superliner train sets with additional unoccupied cars in order to ensure railroad crossing signals can be activated at the operating speeds of passenger trains, which they claim are necessary due to the shorter length, lower weight, and speed of Amtrak's operations. With the shunting devices installed, CN would theoretically have their demands met, and Amtrak could use the Superliners currently serving on that line as filler cars on Borealis or other routes. While those are just a handful of cars, Borealis is only 2 train sets for a total operation of the service. One which could use the second place for passengers to occupy on this longer than average state-sponsored route. Something other than the restroom or vestibule they're not meant to spend extended periods of time occupying. But, like I said, passengers seem to be satisfied aboard our train today. They're treating this several hundred-mile journey like a transatlantic flight. They're settled in with laptops, tablets, phones, and are buying out all of the limited inventory of food and drinks from the snack bar. So why can't I bed down with this, a second train to double passenger service and improve the state of rail in the upper Midwest? Well, I've gone further with Amtrak over the years than most new riders. I've been aboard the next trains with slightly more amenities than this, and I'm a believer that having things like a lounge car and fresh air breaks built into the schedule increases the experience of taking a long train ride. While I expected the first several years of Borealis to draw a lot of new riders over many years before it could be definitively proved that such amenities were desired, after Amtrak's had enough surveys returned that say the train felt crowded and there was too little to do to entertain riders, I feel this equipment shortage that's relegated this service to a crowded, all-in-too-few coaches experience is something that might add kindling to the fire on which the airline industry loves to burn Amtrak via lobbyists on the state and national funding stage levels. It's really the lack of and comparison with the business class product I started out on today. If Borealis is to remain a bi-level superliner operation, it makes sense to me that it's an all-coach train. But the upper level views alone aren't doing it for this rider, who's taken this route so often as to know where we're at via a look out the window at any given time in the trip. Also, the crew on this train were vocal about how the crowded train makes their jobs more difficult. Not just more snacks to be sold, and nowhere to route that line for snacks other than up the stairs and into the snack coach's upper seating level, but the conductor was overheard explaining that he has nowhere to sit, and to complete paperwork mandated by Amtrak, the railroads, and government, making the conductor's job done on their feet for several hours at a time, while moving and answering to passenger needs, as well as operating coach doors at stops and scanning tickets throughout the journey. And that's all assuming no mechanical breakdowns happen as they did on my spring journey eastbound with these train sets. It's a stressful affair for crew and passengers, with more experience aboard Amtrak's various levels of amenities. We want something more, but even the most crowded train sets these days don't bring in enough funds to order new train sets, let alone institute new stations and more frequency along the line to help things out. I can settle my own concerns just by taking the later Empire Builder westbound and enjoying what the long-distance train has to offer. Eastbound is a whole other set of priorities and alternatives that I won't go into today, because we're finally pulling into St. Paul Union Depot, and I've done what so many other YouTubers often tease their Amtrak videos with. I survived over 7 hours on a train with only a coach seat for my personal space. But for my efforts, a couple of special locomotives have been left at the depot after a weekend event, the view of which somewhat salves my stiff neck muscles and sore backside.
Well, that's nice to see. My treat for that was getting to see Hustle Muscle again, in the same place it was on my first video. Okay. I don't normally say this getting off an Amtrak train in St. Paul, but I'm so glad to be off that train. There's quite a bit to unpack here, as I'm sure you've already heard in my voiceovers. Well, that's nice. It's all open. Always good to see. So as I was saying from the beginning, they really need something else to do on that train. When they were describing it as your transportation provider, Amtrak's definitely fulfilling that, but in the same way that Greyhound is just a transportation provider. They could really make something of this service, but they don't have the cars for it. Getting more sightseer lounges, cafes, if they're gonna keep going with superliners, that's the way to go. Or get the new Aero sets out and bring some Amfleets over. What are you gonna do with the Horizon cars? Decisions need to be made because it's getting a little rough with how many people will just sit in the seat for 3 hours at a time. And like, if I could have gone to the cafe, yeah, I could have asked to, you know, get up and go, but just bring the food back to the seat. There's not a lot of options on these trains right now. But you got the same thing going on the Texas Eagle. They only just got a sightseer lounge back on the city of New Orleans. The guy sitting next to me, that's how he started his trip. That must have been some sort of shock coming from that to the Borealis. And there's not even the full set of features on the city of New Orleans. It could be a better service. You can't rely on people to just want to take a train forever. It's got to be marketable. It's got to be enjoyable. It's got to be something different. It can't just be better than Greyhound. I mean, come on. I'm gonna go home and cook my feelings because I am starving. I'm going to see you on the next trip, whatever order the videos might be in. I can't wait to be there with you on it. Hopefully something a little less extreme than the basic that was the Borealis. Thanks for watching.